For this first hour, we want to look at the adolescents and young adults in schools and whether they are actually exposed and to a level of abusing substances, alcohol and substance abuse in the education system. Janet Ouko is an educationist. She joins us for this hour. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning, Eric.
It's good to have you back here.
It's always my pleasure to be here.
You know, your namesake is going to give you the day's quote. Today's quote is by Janet who?
No, today's not Janet. This is Janet via Rosa Luxemburg, who was a Polish and naturalized German revolutionary. That's how she's described. And she once said, "The one who does not move does not notice their chains."
Wow. The one who does not move does not notice
their
their
chains.
Chains.
Yes, yes.
Okay, sort of maybe you can liken it to to just bring it closer home to the one who does not eat enough food from someone else might just be thinking that their mother probably is the best cook. So I think for me it's about just seeing different experiences so that then you can even be able to appreciate your situation, good or bad, and probably even say it is not the worst there is, or really say I am doing so badly and I maybe need to do something different. Yeah,
It's good perspective.
I like that. Yeah, I like that saying. Is usually like, yeah, you think your mother's food is the best. And then I think the beauty of life is perhaps thinking, my mother's food is the best. And then exploring other things and being like, wow, these are nice. And then coming right back.
Full circle.
Yeah.
To actually affirm that your mother's
Still the best.
You come back and you're like, I miss my mother's food. This is what I've known all my life.
Yes.
These spices of yours are nice, but
You
okay.
know. Janet, we have talked a lot about young people getting into alcohol and substance abuse. In fact, a report by NACADA last year was indicating how much there is alcohol and substance abuse in universities.
yeah.
Now, let's even go below the universities and high schools. And we've seen very many instances of people saying, there's substance abuse in high schools and in our schools. From your dealings with fellow educationists, is it true?
Thank you, Eric. I think today I am really here, not so much so to actually even talk about the young people, like to even give a perspective of the parents, because I think parents are the bearers of the burden. When when all is said and done, because NACADA has done really well in telling us what percentage is consuming, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, parents might wish to think that their children are not part of that statistic. Every parent is wishing that 17% is referring to other children, is not referring to my child.
It's human nature.
And to parents listening to me today, they know this thing is so close home. And those are not just statistics, these are dreams. These are futures of children that are being robbed away. And I do not think it's even a moral issue within the youth. Because I have seen children of my friends, children that I know, they went to Sunday school, and the parent has really done everything there is to do for a child. And then they go to the university, like you say, or even probably high school. And you begin to see your child changing, and you don't know what to do about it. Because by that time, they even start becoming secretive, and you're also busy with your work and so on. So by the time you even know it, by the time your child is probably finishing first year, they are a different person. And one of the things that has really touched my heart is the fact that after that child is lost, come and see what the rehabilitation process. Parents must be 60,000 per month in rehabilitation. If you are lucky to negotiate, it could be something like 40,000 per month. Now, not many Kenyans can afford that amount of money. And that is how we are losing a generation of young people.
You've been in education for a while, and I'm glad you've talked about that parent's perspective. I'm just curious, from your observation, is anything creating further pressure for children to sort of transition as they grow older to substance abuse? Because I like what you've said. You can do everything right.
Yes.
I think that's one of my biggest fears. You do everything right, and then the world is the world. But just from your observation,
Yes.
Where are we now compared to where we were? How are young people feeling a certain pressure that maybe wasn't there before that could be one of the reasons that they're getting into drug abuse?
You know, and honestly speaking, there isn't much we can do about the world pressures. There isn't much you can do about the world pressures. And for a fact, academics has not changed.
Yeah.
Even from our time, there were pressures. I mean, you got to go to class. So we do not want to pretend that there is a lot of pressure now. And I'm back to school right now, and I'm reading. And I know that reading right now is easier than it was during my time. I'm accessing every content on my phone. During my time, to access a book, you had to go sit in the library, and sometimes even that book is not there. You don't even know how to locate it until you turn the pages to find what you're looking for. But right now, you can type in what you want on your phone, and you get it. So this thing about pressure, maybe pressure, we can talk about it in terms of unemployment and so on. Now we're talking about post-university youth, or probably those youths that have not been able to progress to college. But the thing here is availability of drugs right now. And there's a whole collapse of the enforcement system. So how do you explain to me that in the last 5 years, I've seen a statistic by NACADA that cannabis use, for example, has risen by over 90% in the last 5 years. And right now, drugs are available. Like the way you'd buy a matchbox, that's how any child would access any drug. And I don't want to pretend that our children are so well protected, even if they went to church the whole while. I mean, peer pressure is just peer pressure.
Yep.
So for me, I think that parents have really tried. For the last about 8 years or so, we've been preaching to parents. Hold your children together. Take them to church. Take them to concerts. Parents have tried. But what is the government doing to support this effort by parents? How is it that we only know that XYZ% are taking drugs? How is it that we do not know how many chemists, for example, have been closed, especially those selling this prescriptive drug, drugs that are destroying the youth? How is it that we do not have a number that we have closed 10 this month? How is it that we have not seen people jailed for it? Forget even the big drug barons that we talk about. We're talking about these chains of distribution. Now, how is it that this government has intelligence about everything? They can arrest a Gen Z who tweeted on something, but they cannot arrest a network of distribution of some of these drugs. I mean, it's real sabotage. And I feel bad because when I see what parents are going through, and I imagine that the government has a responsibility to protect this youth that you have trained so hard. You've used quite an amount of resources to train these children, only for them to get to an end and just see dreams, going up in flames.
But is the government equipped? Even if we look at schools, are schools equipped to, because there's a lot of drug possession that happens even in unis, etc. Are they equipped to either detect or to speak to students? Because it's there as well. It's high school, it's uni. Talk about whether the education system is equipped to deal with it. There's NACADA. What about the education system?
So because I think one of our biggest problems is always looking at something in isolation. We want to have NACADA, which is charged with the policy issues around drug use and abuse, and also campaigns, and so on. And then we also want to imagine that schools could become other NACADAs. So how about partnerships with this? What is NACADA doing? Because we know the hotbeds. There are universities, 18 plus, or secondary schools and the environs, around there. Because NACADA is telling us that they are mapping drug sellers around schools. So how is all this information generated by NACADA permeating, to the right people, so that this campaign can be one very big coordinated campaign? Because again, we are not able to build the capacity of NACADA, and then we go to every school and capacitate, everyone. So it's about a coordinated campaign. And I think NACADA, we've seen a few campaigns, where they have one celebrity who is going around telling people smoking is not cool. But hey, I mean, they are the real issues. For example, if you think about vape, for an example, which is the latest entry, it's all the way to the primary school. So we're bringing up nicotine addicted kids. And what happens by the time they are in high school, they want to upgrade to something better.
Stronger.
Stronger. So they upgrade to something like cannabis, for example. And then they get to the university and they discover, cannabis is really not doing this thing for me. They go into heroin. So I think for me, it's NACADA ought to do better. It ought to do more. It doesn't just mean that once in a few and far between campaigns, you have this one celebrity going around saying 1, 2, 3 things. Yeah. It's about really the grassroots levels. How is NACADA coordinating, for example, with the community policing, units, like the Nyumba Kumi initiatives, the head teachers associations, around school, so that then they're able to even build their capacities, because we need very good messaging, especially on this thing called vape. The way it's the flavors and all that and all that. And also, NACADA could even help members of parliament to do legislations. Yeah. Because how is a primary school child, like for example, walking around with that vape? What are the age restriction limits? And what is happening to the vendors, of these things? So I feel like we've let loose quite a lot amount of poison, and we are sitting the other side and asking our youth, calling it a moral issue. No, it is not a moral issue. Actually, government needs to support the young people in it, because a lot of them are getting into it. We were all young. We did 1 or 2 things, in that excitement and so on. And if someone had not supported you, probably you couldn't have turned out the way that you did. So I think this is also a cry from the young people of this country saying, please help us. Right. We look like we're in some ditch. We do not know how we got here, and we don't even know how to get out. Can we get support to get out? They don't know the depth of it.
Janet, you mentioned NACADA, and I think if you look at NACADA and the laws that are there, so we have the Tobacco Control Act, you have all those things, you have government actually coming in to outlaw some of these things, push to say things like vape and all, controlling. In fact, there was an amendment to the Tobacco Control Act to start including these other substances, right? And all those, the conversation around government speaking as one and acting as one has very many loopholes. But I like how you started and said, let's then bring it to the community and start appreciating the issue at the community level. Because I feel that the community has not appreciated this issue. Whenever there's a parent who's dealing with a child who is, using and abusing these substances, it is restricted to within their homestead. And you want to shield that conversation and information. Does that do more harm by, just all of us keeping quiet and dealing with it? Kivyetu, going to school and not even saying why this child was expelled from that school, or why the child was suspended and you're called to school. When you go to school and the teachers are telling you, we've called you here because we found your child with these substances. And the reaction of the many parents, what's this thing that we are not doing?
We are not thinking ahead and preparing for things. I'll give you an example of a trending issue. I'll give you an example of the LGBTQ. Like, for example, you are aware that it is rampant in schools right now. Why? Because we converted our schools to girls' schools and others to boys' schools. So we have a situation right there. And when teachers get you, for example, you're in a lesbianism situation, there is nothing else they know how to do apart from expel you. Yes, they have no solution. They have not been supported to talk to you. The only thing that they think about doing is you will spoil the rest. You will spoil the others.
So
go home. So when you go home, who do you find? You find your mother and your father. And they are so embarrassed about the situation that they don't even want a neighbor to know that this is what you are involved in. Now, you are so zoned out from everybody else, including no school wants to admit you. So how about if we would confront the challenges of today and the challenges that our youth are going through today by first thinking through and saying, what is the policy? Because I do not believe that because a child is going in that way, then they lose their right to education. No, that is not what should happen.
Yeah.
But because the government has not, or the ministry for that matter, has not thought about these issues and really put in place measures, how do we want to handle, how do we want to deal with such situations? And that is where we find ourselves with drugs. When a family, because by the time the child gets to a situation now that is now beginning to get noticed by the community, a lot of them are becoming very aggressive towards the parents. A lot of them now drop out of school and they don't want to be asked by someone, you know, some of these side effects such as psychosis. A child is so not real, like they're not here, but they're here, and the things that they're talking about. So the parent is left with no option but to start fighting with the child.
Yeah.
They expel the boy from the home, or they, you know, so it's really becoming a situation that is helpless, a situation that ought to be helpful. Let's wonder, has the community thought about that at one point we will have this kind of a solution of a problem? How do we correct a child that has fallen into drugs? Have we thought about rehabilitation, for example? And what does it take to do rehabilitation? I have honestly looked at parents taking their children to Mathare, and it's a very humbling experience. It's a very humbling experience. And we would wish that the government and the Ministry of Youth, what else is the Ministry of Youth dealing with apart from supporting young people, not only to be, to do business and so on and so forth? I see them. But how about the percentage of young people that are lost, that we are losing in this thing? How do we bring them back?
I want to stay at home. Because you see, and this is not saying, responsibility moves from government. Responsibility for government is government responsibility.
Correct.
But also, at home, it's not about a responsibility issue, it's an acceptance issue.
Yes.
What are these barriers that make people not want to talk or acknowledge that their child could be using drugs? What is this? Because you took your child to Sunday school, so you're raising them up in a certain way. And there's a way in which the church accepts all of us to be. So you now imagine that one day the other members of your church have noticed your son or daughter vaping. And they came and told you.
Yes.
The first thing that you feel is not, oh, thank you very much for coming to let me know. It is, oh my God, now they found out.
I know.
Now is she going to tell everybody else in church?
Yeah, even before Janet comes in, I think it's that. It's shame. It's and it happens in little ways. Don't even go to like a neighborhood.
Yep.
Something will happen with a child, and the first thing that it's met with is shame.
Yep.
And I think we don't realize how much shame manifests in everything else. It manifests in not knowing how to correct, not knowing how to seek support, not knowing how to seek help. And it's really frustrating. I think we live in a society that's very shameful.
Yes.
Because if shame didn't exist, it would be easy to say, I need help. I don't know what to do with my child.
And even the neighborhood, then the Nyumba Kumi coming together and saying, okay, guys, so we are dealing with this. Let's come up with measures so that our children do not end up here. Yeah. Or a child was seen buying this and the other, and we asked the child, so who else has been using it? And now we found out this for children. So how do we support this for children in our community?
Yeah. No, stigma. Yes, Maria.
I've been very quiet because I say I think we're approaching this wrong. We have not asked ourselves the why. Like truly, truly, truly the why. And I don't know the why, but I definitely know that if we start from the fix as opposed to the why, we'll get it wrong for sure. And for me, I think to get to the why is to speak to young people who are actually the ones who are essentially trying out a vape here and then being like, okay, cool. Okay, I tried it out of curiosity, or I tried it because Janet was trying it and it kind of looked cool on her, or I tried it because why not?
For funsies.
And so on and so forth. And then it's like, okay, so what changed then from I tried the vape once to I did something else, or to I then decided this is an everyday thing. It's addictive, that's a regulation issue. And I think I've used this example before, like the UK regulates the amount of nicotine in vapes, and they saw their addiction rates drop significantly just by that simple. But that's a whole other thing. So for me, I'm like, what is the why? And I'll be honest, I think community for a long time was much smaller, such that if this is a community and Mariam is the bad one, it was so easy to weed me out and to deal. It's true though, and to be like, nikikuona umekana Mariam, it is a problem. And that was 1 + 1 = 2, very easy to police and to create healthy communities and to even be able to warn and give guidance where it is. Now, in a literal global village, young people are at the same time isolated and exposed to everything.
Yeah.
Isolated in the sense that they don't feel like they can speak to older folks, one, genuinely about what it is, because like you can't relate. And that's a problem every generation has had. It's fair. But now, the thing is, the solutions to that are not just your peers who have the same information as you. It's that you have the knowledge of the world, like at the touch of of your fingertips. And therein, it's how do we create healthy communities, starting from parents, yes, but also peers, such that it works for us, not against us. Because right now I can see how if all of us, if I'm depending on Janet and Eric as my sources of information, plus ChatGPT, plus TikTok, you can see how we will all go down the same rabbit hole. I'm just really trying to interrogate the why. Sorry for the rant, but just trying to interrogate why are we here before we even try and
they need to always be on the table, because we speak and then
that's
they're like, have you asked me why? Yeah, it's a good point.
And you see that, I only also feel that we really need to have very honest conversations with everyone and first put it down that challenges have been there generation to generation.
Yeah.
But we are appreciating, and I think I have appreciated the fact that when I was growing up, actually seeing someone smoking was like taboo. Smoking cannabis, for example. Cigars were there, but cannabis was like taboo. It was
even
really
for adults.
Even for adults.
Yep.
And it was and it was so restricted. But you see now narratives have changed.
True.
In the last general elections, we even have had a whole campaign of, legitimize, So I'm saying that because parents are not the owners of this burden, it has always to squarely remain with government to lead in this narrative. How has this narrative of legalize affected? Because as you can see the statistics, it's moving to 90%, increased usage. So how is government countering some of these narratives? Because it has to remain ahead of time. So we have done all this campaign and things look like they are acceptable. So, but how does that affect young people? What are we doing to reinvent the campaigns that we have been doing, Because we all must drink from a river. But that river must be cleaned for us to drink of it. So if we're not cleaning this river, how do we clean the river? Is to ensure that these substances at least are hard to get.
Let's pause there, just because we're going into a break. We'll come back and see if we can pick up from the point of the river, but also looking at campaigns differently, which maybe goes again back to what Mariam was alluding to, which is can they be part of the campaign? So can we get, information from young people themselves? But we are in studio with Janet Ouko, an educationist, talking about trying to tackle the issue of drug addiction among the youth. We'll be back in a moment. It's coming up to 7:30. Some feedback on YouTube, quite a bit. Shy Lobby Gaming says, Janet is right on enforcement. Nursery school on the first floor, ground floor of wines and spirits in Pipeline and Mukuru ETC. During my time, the first peddler I saw was a samosa or bajia vendor at the gate. Francis Odhiambo, good morning, Fixers. Our approach to drug abuse and addiction as parents is wrong. How about tell our children the effect of drugs as opposed to wewe endelea kuvuta bangi? Robert Minor.
Nikuzike.
Yeah, just it's always the reinforcement of trauma. Robert Minor says Janet Ouko is worth listening to. She should be CS for education. She has the problems and solutions ailing our systems at her fingertips. So Some flowers from Robert.
Thank you,
Two more
Robert.
comments. Christian, 2001, says, substance abuse is now, unfortunately, a big part of youth culture. It's marketed as an escape from reality, as a way to cope with social anxiety, as an escape from the frustrations and stress of modern life. Finally, Stakima Pepe says, the drug problem some time back was an urban menace, but nowadays it's a problem across the country, even in villages. The greater problem sometimes is some parents are drug dealers and peddlers. Shida. It's complex. It's from all angles, really. I think we've been deliberating even during the break. How do we, where do we begin? What's the approach now? If the approaches previously are not necessarily working, or if they are, do they need to evolve? If they're not, is there a new way we need to look at it? You said something interesting, which you'll share in a bit, which is about peers being their own community. And I thought about somebody on YouTube. He does really interesting videos, and it's jarring at first because he's young and he's coming from a place of, I used to abuse substances. Then he goes very scientific and social, and he'll say, then he kind of reviews a lot of artists and musicians who died. He's like, let's talk about Elvis. Let's talk about exactly why, and this accidental overdose and how young people are looking at it. And I think that's an interesting perspective because he's a young person who has overcome, and now he goes granular into this is what these things contain. This is why young people are attracted to this particular one because of the constant dopamine high it gives you, and this is how to counter it.
Even
But
just explaining like the brain chemistry.
He really does.
I quite like that. Yeah, because it sounds like I get that, because think of yourself as a child, a teen, even a preteen. You know, think about someone telling you, unajua hii kitu niliona pia, wewe si wa kwanza, usitumi. Think about that, as opposed to someone your age or close saying the probable reason why you shouldn't try is ABC. It's that one, your brain chemistry right now is a lot more susceptible to addiction. So if you start now, you are a lot more likely to
be more
right?
addicted
and
over
this
time.
And case studies are, oh, this was Elvis, this was da-da-da. And it doesn't have to be Elvis, it can be someone a lot closer to home that you can associate with. I think that lands a lot more than even an Akada drug campaign. Now, we managed to do like effective fear mongering, for example, with pamoja tuepuke ukimwi. Ilikuwa inaendaje? Ilikuwa inaenda hivyo. Tuangamize ukimwi. That one. And it worked because it was in your face everywhere all at once. But it was also targeted to the people who at the time were the biggest, what would I say, the most susceptible. Yeah, because it was Jimmy Gathu, yes?
Yep.
Gathu speaking to his peers.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. Anyway, just thinking out
Campaigns
loud.
have happened over time. Because remember, there was even the teenage one,
Yes.
the Mechil campaign, which is
That's what-
the
that's
destigmatization of the AIDS message. Before the Mechil campaign, there was the bad one of AIDS kills. And so changing that into making it cool to chill, right?
Nimechill.
Make it cool to chill, and so on and so forth. People like Jim Watt, whom we've hosted here, have gone to schools, and they're going to school and saying, you know, I got addicted into drugs. I'm a musician. This is how my path into addiction. This is one way of dealing with it. It must be multifaceted. And like we're saying, if we start from the community level, because a child grows up in a community. A child grows up, like Janet is saying, you take your child to Sunday school, and then to play group, they're playing with fellow children in the estate or in shags in the village, and then they go to school. So the one first big community for children as they are growing up is that school community, which is where they start getting exposed to multiple forms of information.
True.
Are our teachers equipped enough to actually handle this? Like, I think, Janet, you've said this before, we don't have pastoral teachers. It's just one teacher who's made discipline master, who's made, but we actually don't have proper pastoralism in schools of guidance and counseling proper at school level.
Yeah.
Coming back home, we have sort of like, so I've thrown it to the school, to the teachers. When you come back, I expect that you're coming back prim and proper. And we shall go to church on Sunday. And if I discover that now you have discovered cigarettes, I'm starting to think problem is the school. Problem ni mtoto wa Janet. Problem is mtoto wa nini. And then I will deal with you perpendicularly.
Oh man, what a trigger.
You know?
Janet, the school, going back to what I
Yeah.
think the school, again, it's also what we asked earlier in terms of the education. Are they equipped to deal with this?
For me, I like coming from the working with the knowns as we go to the unknowns, you know. And this whole conversation has been there. That's why NACADA was established. You know, an assessment was done about why are we seeing the drug menace like going up and up, you know, what can be done? And all these things were spoken about. The community can do better. But let's be very honest. We do not have an institution that can help cause this which we are saying about communities together. Let's be honest, especially in Nairobi. Youth don't have play areas anymore. They don't have areas to socialize anymore. Now, we cannot say that we first want to go and create spaces for them. You know, right now, as we are currently, what are the knowns? What are some of the issues, solutions that we can prefer? Like, for example, you've mentioned very good campaigns that used to happen. Where are the NACADA campaigns anymore? Is it a funding problem? You know, is anybody funding NACADA anymore? Is NACADA funded to be able to reach out to the youth, to be able to be this versatile, to do researches and you know and to engage persons that can talk to the youth, the role models of the young people? Like we are saying, the campaigns used to happen, you know, because the IEBC has got funding for civic education.
It does.
So the nexus is that who are you doing civic education to? You know, so one of the things that we want to find out is NACADA supported, funded to be able to undertake these kinds of campaigns. Now, number two, let us look at our enforcement. What are the accountabilities with the enforcement agencies, for example? I dare say that they're big enablers. How do you tell me that drugs are in every shop and they know it? Can we sanitize the enforcement situation? And can we really call out and say, look, we are losing a generation? And this is a call really from parents that we do not know what else to do. Parents are getting to that situation. And you know, they're not parents of slum, you know, the traditional settings. Apparently, if you go to Coach, for example, they know how to deal with it because they've grown with the menace, and they've known how to message across each other. You see, young people have become resilient. They know what to avoid. They know where to avoid because they grow up with that kind of a situation. But enter you and I. We've brought up our children, kumbeba kwa gari, ukimpeleka hapa, ukimbeba hapa. But you know, you can't lock up your child forever. They will go to the university. They might probably be a commuter, or they might probably even board in that college. Now, that is a shock that is coming in because luckily, they do not have a problem with a few coins for buying, you know, the drugs and so on and so forth. So I think for me, the enforcement, we need also to interrogate the enforcement. How are we using intelligence? We have seen intelligence working in this country. If someone wants to be arrested right here and right now, they will be arrested. So how about drug peddlers? We're not even talking about big drugs. We're not talking about the big boys clubs of cocaine. No. We were talking about these peddlers who are peddling cannabis, who are peddling heroin. These chemists and pharmacists who are dispensing prescriptive drugs. You know, what is being done about it? Because these are institutions that we can hold to account. You know, like the Poisons and Pharmacies, you know, control board can be able to deregister pharmacists. They can be able to track consignments. And so they can be able even to check and say, why are you dealing in this bulk? You know, where are you taking this bulk to? Sort of, there are low-hanging fruits that we can already begin so that to try and clean this river and try and cut on the supply so that then when we've cut on the supply, because as you said, Mariam, rightly, is that there's a child out there who will be trying it for trying's sake. But when getting it becomes hard, they'll give up on the trial.
On the trial.
So we really must get hold of our institutions. We cannot move away from NACADA. We cannot move away from the enforcement agencies. We cannot move away from Poisons and Pharmacies Board and now go to the parents and tell them, you guys form cells for doing A, B, C, and D. How much will that take? Who will be responsible for that? We already have churches doing quite an amount. So I'm asking NACADA, how are you partnering with people that don't even require you to pay them, like churches? What messages do they need to pass? Because the messages that they will pass, the only thing they know is fear-mongering. They have not started appreciating this chemistry. They have not even, they have not been capacitated. They will just be saying, you either perish or, and the youth
do drugs and perish.
And the youth are not, because they have seen someone who has not perished. They have seen someone who has not perished. They have seen campaigns about in the West where cannabis is really cool and so on and so forth. So what exactly is the bodies that already are there that can be funded, that can be held to account by Kenyans? What are they doing? I think we really need to press that button and just really wonder, the Ministry of Interior, how are you helping the youth of this country to go around? Because they're about 4 years, between 18 and plus 4 years and 22. By the time a young person really understands that, no, if I go this route, because at 18 and 24, that is where the crisis is. Between 18 and 24. So if we let these drugs, nowadays alcohol is just, I know a place where the community has done everything that they can. But there is somebody who is just brewing it. There is a chief. There is everybody. And people are helpless. Why? Because we are neighbors. How am I able to harass you when you're my neighbor? Why is government...
illicit alcohol.
Yes. In broad daylight. But what is the enforcement? What is the enforcement doing, for example? We need some accountabilities.
I like the idea of campaigns, and basically NACADA has released a report that cries out and says there's an emergency, all right? And in the presence of, this report was released in the presence of the Cabinet Secretary for Interior, who also came out during that release and said, yes, there's an emergency. So it's a what beyond that, right? I like the idea of, let's push that NACADA gets a budget and comes up with campaign, and it's basically a multi-stakeholder campaign, but guided by NACADA with various other actors, whether it's now going into religious organizations, into non-governmental institutions, and so on and so forth. Let's work on a campaign that targets this age bracket, because they're getting exposed and they're getting introduced and hooked into substance abuse, which is a crisis of the future. And at present, how do we fund it? If we just go back into a conversation that we had the day before yesterday on the sin tax versus health tax, right? Because there's already tax that comes out of some of these products. Where is that money going? How do you ring-fence such money? Even money from betting. So a lot of it now is going to be paying for Talanta Stadium for the next 15 years. But can we still get some of that money to go into an NACADA kitty that says, let's address the addiction issue and to fund campaigns, so that even if MPs are telling us, you see resources, there's money that is being collected from excise duty from this product, there's money that's being collected from betting and all these other products. Put that money into good social use.
And have the right people, because I feel like it also would need a redesign of how campaigns are done. A lot of things that spread now are organic. It's almost like the way campaigns are done is also a detriment. You're going to do it the same way, but things are changing. And things are changing every day. It doesn't mean you completely do away, but there has to be a combination of, let's say, what they call above the line and below the line, but beyond.
It has to be like I show speed saying, you vape?
Yeah,
I'm just doing a
there
stank
you
face.
go. Literally.
Like that's a campaign on its own.
Yes. That's how it is with young people. It's it has to be so, it has to just be organic. Don't talk at me. Don't come and be like, this is a public service announcement. People will move on. Like, oh no, you. It's a combination. I'm not saying don't do that, but even with NACADA, Nakada, it's how are you thinking about redesigning your campaigns? Are you sitting around a table with people who have some form of organic influence with their peers to be like, sir, that won't cut it. Maybe we can try it in these different ways. And I think sometimes there's a hesitation in redesigning because something has worked for so long, but then you can tell the consumption is different. And I always say, even at home, the way my kids are going to get information, it's rarely from the people that we think it's from. Even good information, they'll say somebody's name and have to go research. It turns out it's this person who's online, and that's how they relay the information. Then it sticks, right? You know, so there also has to be. Sometimes I feel like there's an assumption. We are dealing with generational issues that exist, yes, but we can't deny that there's different. There's an onset of different rules and ways in which people are living and moving. I know you said earlier, social media is not an excuse, but I think at the same time, it's a reality. Yeah. You know?
And I look at the way you're thinking, and I'm wondering, the persons who are in charge of Nakada, are they able to think this way? Or because there's something also the young people are saying, when they say that they want to get into these spaces, and we don't let them. We still insist. You see chairman of board appointments, and you're seeing the same 67-year-olds, retirees who are being looked for their friends, a place to hang around so that they don't get so bored in shags. How are those people able to bring any difference, with all due respect? Are we engineering our institutions to work for us, or are we already sabotaging ourselves with the people that we have put behind institutions, so that Nakada is just Nakada
by name,
but the people behind it, because the people are the minds, you know, the people are the thought process, they're the movers, you know, of things. So that I do not even think it's much more about the budget, because we've seen minds can move. There are many people who are willing even to partner with people. You know, how are you able to move the church? It doesn't cost you money, you know, to call churches together for something, you know, and just have churches spreading these messages. So I think also it's about the institutions that we have. How are they addressing these issues? How are they appreciating this youth crisis? And the same goes to the enforcement agencies. Are they already looking at it from where mtoto unasumbua, so ni kiboko, you know, are they looking at it from that perspective? And what exactly do we need to do to inject young people, fresh thoughts, people who can have alternative approaches that really reduce our dependence on money? Severally, I have seen Kenyans saying, a whole institution will have so many non-things done, but we'll just throw one sentence. We don't have a budget for it.
That's it.
Yeah, and it becomes sort of to close you out. And it's non-accountability. It's not everything that must be done using money. You are there from 8 to 5 as a human being. You have got internet. The internet is paid for. What are you pushing? You know, we can't just throw money at everything.
What memes are you making and sharing? I agree. I wanted to spread it out. I feel like this is not to defend Nakada. They've gotten the short end of the stick with this one. Well, they have a lot to do. But I was trying to think countrywide from a policy perspective, the things that we can be doing actively. And it goes back again to the why. I'm thinking from our education system, how much time when we talk about, oh, this is your pathway, this is that, how much are we investing, for example, in sporting and extracurricular activities? Because I assure you, someone who is in school and then on the football field playing tennis, sijui squash, sijui running, sijui that is someone who is engaged, who is building their mind, their body, who also is statistically is a lot less likely to abuse drugs. How much are we investing in ensuring that young people have work? It's the basics. Because again, it's not all a factor of my peers. It's just, I had nothing to do. I am feeling desolate. I am feeling depressed. I have done what was required of me and the math is not mathing. I need an escape, right? What are we doing to ensure that, again, even the regulators themselves are approaching this from a point of, what would I call, information, like we've talked about with using the science behind it. So I think by the time Nakada comes in, their job should essentially be a lot easier. We should have already done every other thing to ensure that young people have community, activities, education, wholesome everything. And then now, it's Nakada, you're coming in to just plug a small hole, not like a leaking, a massive just...
Yeah.
Guys, I don't know. Again, thinking out loud, this conversation has really taken me round and round and round and trying to figure out what is the nexus. Ndio sasa, we thread from there. But you're right, Janet, about our approach and even making sure that we don't peg it all to money or to the people that are currently in these positions, because if we don't do things differently, then in a few months, Janet will have you back. We'll be like, hey, drug and alcohol addiction, and
Same
so
problem,
on, and
same issue.
and so on and so forth.
Charity Ngoy is saying new games, new sports, new information. She also says communities are struggling, but they have new games. Niwapate aje. Charity, sisi tuko hapa Nation Center.
New games.
The Alchemist. Young people should be encouraged to talk about their issues and find alternative, healthy ways and not find ways to cope with drugs.
Sometimes I just feel like it's gaslighting.
Cliche.
Talk about your issues. I'm like, I know I want to. I'm just stuck. You know that thing where you're willing people who are willing, but they are jaded or, and you're just like, so you just talk. What is your problem? What issue are you having? I'm like,
but you know, Janet, this is your mother. Like, this is your mother. She doesn't know any other way.
Yeah.
Because I think also we need to appreciate that, like, your mother did not change from being her when you started having a drug problem. She did not go to any training to know how to deal with it. This is her. The one who was telling you, eat or you will die.
It's the same her.
It's the same her.
So it's also her first time on this earth, her first time being a parent.
I know.
And
her first time dealing with a child who has this kind of behavior.
Yeah.
And that is why we are saying, really, parents have been on it. Like, parents this, parents the other. And parents have done it. Parents have done it. And parents now are screaming out for help from the institutions that are mandated to at least support us just a little bit. If that drug was not available, I am sure my son, even if he had money, he would not have accessed it. Or at least he would have had difficulty accessing it, So that bit. Now, this capacity that you want me to pass on to my son, unless I Google, but there is Nakada. Yes. That has if Nakada made available to us, even things like brochures, for example, outside churches, like the way we go and pick, I will pick it and I'll at least try as a parent to build my capacity to just understand, because I know we had a problem in my son's school about vape. I heard about it, and I had to Google and just find out what is this. And you should have seen the panic with parents. They don't know what to do, they don't know how to approach it, and they're wondering, with my child, those are the parents that we are dealing with. And that is a fact. Just that we are confronting the reality about the youth, that they're exposed to so much information, they don't know what to do. There's also a reality about their parents. This is what we are dealing with.
No, for sure. I'm not even invalidating that as somebody who has only been a mom for like 11 years. I know that in the last 1 year, I've had to change in real time. And it's so hard because the way I'd be like, threatening, remembering my mother's voice and channeling her voice through mine. In 1 year, I've had to shift because then you find somebody's closing up. So I know it's a combination of factors, as you're saying, Janet. It's parents, it's the stakeholders like Nakada, it's the young people. I do know, though, that there's room, again, that moral panic thing, that it doesn't work for this generation. And it's hard, it's a hard reality. And no matter how much you try, you don't know if it'll be enough. But I do think that, yes, we can panic as parents, but there's something we have to fundamentally shift if we want to try and just get through somehow. And then hope it works. You know, so there's also that to think about. I know it's many things. There's a counselor coming. Maybe we'll start with, can you debrief us first? I'll be like, sir, start here.
Start with a check-in.
Start with a check-in.
How is your heart,
Yeah.
Mariam? How is your heart, Tariq? Janet, how are your hearts?
But I honestly wish, and I would make this appeal,
Yeah.
people who can be able to set up rehabilitation
Yes,
centers.
for sure.
Please
We'll ask
do
him
that,
about
so
it.
that at least we try and bring the cost down a
Down.
little, so that many parents can privately be able to do that, even before we invite government.
Yes.
When you have a child with a problem, at least you have a cost-effective place where you can take them
Yeah,
for
make the access
therapy.
easier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. I know we'll have you back again. Thank you for your insights into just a wide array of issues to do with children and education. In the next hour, Richard Wafula is a counseling psychologist, youth and the mental health crisis. We'll have that conversation with him. It's coming up to 8 a.m.